It is a call to order for the School District Budget Committee on the 2nd of February, 2021. We will dispense with the Pledge of Allegiance as it's a little inconvenient in the Zoom world. And we will proceed to our first order of business, which will be the explanation of procedures.
This meeting is being held via Zoom under the guidelines of the Governor's Emergency Order 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04. Members of the public who want to attend will find the phone numbers that they just need to call in on the school district website and give the webinar ID, which is also available on the website. And if anybody wishes to send a public comment either tonight or for next week's public hearing, they can send an email to the School District Budget Committee email address, which is found on the school district website, rather than read it to you. And all comments will be read into the meeting minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. The agenda this evening is relatively brief. We'll see what we can make of it. We are going to continue our budget review, and we are going to discuss 2 warrant articles that need action on the part of the committee because they have money in them. So we vote on all warrant articles that have money in them to recommend or not recommend. I think it would be probably convenient to start with the warrant articles. So Pat, if you could read the first warrant article.
Chuck, usually Matt presents these.
Well.
Is he not here?
He's here.
He's there.
There he is. Go, Matt. Please.
He's staring, looking for the mute button.
Yeah.
Let me get the warrant articles up. Okay, the first article that the Budget Committee should vote on and consider when they are ready to do so is the Merrimack Educational Support Staff Association contract. It's a 3-year contract. It includes a 3.25% increase each year. It also includes a 1% decrease in the amount that the district pays for health insurance for this association, and a 1% increase that the association will pay to make up the difference. So they're currently sitting at 88.12. In year 1, they would go to 87.13. Year 2, 86.14, and then year 3, 85.15, which is the level that the teachers are currently are at. This saves the district approximately $63,000. And the numbers you see before you represent the net of that, the increase 3.25 minus the savings from the healthcare concession, which everybody knows we've been on this path for quite a few years. When I first got with the district years ago, cost of health insurance to the employee was 0. And now we're hovering around 85.15. So that was a long road to get to where we are, and something that I believe the Budget Committee had spoken about several years ago and continues to talk about, specifically Carol Lang, who brought it up years ago. So in year 1, let me read the whole thing so the audience can hear it. It is posted on our website. Article 3, shall the district approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Merrimack School Board and the Merrimack Educational Support Staff Association, which calls for the following net increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels over the amount paid in the prior fiscal year. Year 21-22, it would be $253,920. Year 22-23 would be $257,813. Year 23-24 would be $267,499. And further, raise and appropriate the sum of $253,920 for the current fiscal year, such sum representing the additional costs attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at the current staffing levels, ends in a question mark. Majority vote required. It was approved by the school board by a vote of 5-0-0. And now it's in front of the budget committee for your consideration.
So, committee members, what is your pleasure?
Chuck, may I ask Matt a question?
Certainly.
If you combine the salary increase and subtract off the savings for the health, what's the percent increase?
Oh, the percent increase is 3.25 every
that's
single year.
After you combine the two.
No, that is the increase.
Okay,
That's
but
not net. That's not a net increase. That is the gross increase. 3.25%.
right, I'm trying to figure out a percentage net increase.
Yeah, no, the percentage net increase is 3.25. We're taking the credit for the health insurance against the amount we're going to raise.
Yeah.
Not the percentage increase that I just stated, because that's not in the warrant article.
So what you're saying is you add the salary increase, you subtract the savings, and then our total cost is going up by 3.25%. Am I correct?
No.
Right. We're
Oh,
crossing.
you take the 3.25. You're right. The 3.25% increase.
Yeah.
That's you add that. If you want to add that back in, you'd add that into the 253, and that'd make it 311, something like that. And then you add the FICA, New Hampshire retirement, everything like that. And of course, the increase would be more than that with FICA and retirement. But the actual increase to the wage earners is actually 3.25%.
So that's the increase on the salary.
Correct.
But I'm still going around in circles here because I'm saying, okay, if you're going to increase salary 3.25%, but you're going to see the savings on the health insurance, at the end of the day, how much is the cost to the district percentage-wise going up?
The cost to the district.
Matt, let me see if I can restate what Carol's
Yeah.
trying to say.
Yeah.
So, well, I think what she's asking is if the salary increase is 3.25%, however, if our healthcare costs went down by 63,000, does that really mean that the percent increases that we're seeing, the percent increase of what this line item is actually 2-point-something%?
Yeah. I can't give you a proper answer to that, but it would definitely be less, probably maybe 2.5%, something like that. Because
Carol, was that what you were getting to? Something like that, Carol?
Yeah, unfortunately, if Matt doesn't have an answer, that kind of leaves me stymied. Because that was really what the crux of my question was. Overall, what's the increased cost to the district?
Well, let me go to another spot on my computer and let's see. Where is Mesa? Hold on. 21-22 salary calculation. Excel's taken up a little bit, salary increase.
So what line in the budget does this land under?
It would be the net increase would be probably around 2.5%. That's what I'm coming up with when I take that out. So that's your answer, Carol. This goes over maybe 30 or 40 line items in the budget. It includes food service. It includes all the paraprofessionals. It includes all the custodians. It includes the administrative assistants. It includes the library media assistants. Yeah, that's the makeup. Food service, I did say food service. I'm trying to go through Title I tutors. Certified occupational therapist. I think that's about it.
And Kias, Matt.
And Kias, yes, thank you. Don't let me forget the Kias.
Are there any other questions? What's the pleasure of the committee in adjudicating this?
If you're amenable, I'd make a motion to approve this.
Recommend.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So that was Carol.
Okay, do we have any further deliberation? Seeing none. Pat, will you give us a roll call on this?
Okay, this was a motion to recommend rather
Yes.
than motion to approve. Motion to recommend.
That's correct.
Okay. Dan,
Recommend.
Jordan,
Recommend.
Carol,
Recommend.
Mackenzie,
Recommend.
Lee,
Recommend.
Chuck,
Recommend.
Gillian,
Recommend.
Brian,
Recommend.
Lori,
Recommend.
Naomi,
Recommend.
Helen,
Recommend.
Andy.
Recommend.
That's unanimous.
Well, that's good. Matt, would you follow on to the second article?
Yep.
Thank you.
The next article is just a follow-on, so you don't vote on that. The one after that that deals with money is Article 5. This is the operating budget article. No, this is the, I'm sorry, the ventilation article. Shall the district vote to authorize the school board to enter into a 10-year lease agreement in the amount of $4 million for the purpose of improving classroom ventilation through the purchase and installation of unit ventilators and associated controls for the Merrimack School District, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $98,556 for the first year's payment for that purpose. This lease agreement contains an escape clause. A majority vote is required. It was approved by the school board by a vote of 5-0-0. This is to, first let me talk about the lease purchase. The first year of the lease, the payment is $98,566, and then it goes on at the amount of $471,167 for the next 9 years to make 10, and then it's paid off. So first year is 98,000, subsequent years of the 10-year lease of 471,000. And what this is to Basically, we had done something similar to this when we did the energy retrofit through Honeywell well over a decade ago, where we added 27 unit ventilators to the upper elementary school at a cost of around $727,000. That was part of a bigger project that we had. What unit ventilators are? They're a unit that's installed in the walls reaching the outside. So you cut a hole in the classroom wall, you go through the block and the brick, and then you install this unit ventilator that pulls in air from the outside, fresh air, and then it tempers it before it gets in the classroom. So if it's 0 degrees out, it's going to heat the air up till it's probably, you know, maybe mid 60s, something like that, maybe low 60s before it pumps it in the room. We have exhaust in all of these classrooms we're talking about. And what this is to add additional air intake into those rooms. There was a study done by Honeywell around 2.5 years ago. It was presented to the school board back in 2018 that there are several rooms that approximately, let's say 55 rooms throughout the district, that the CO2 levels are well above 1,000 parts per million. The highest one we have is around 2,700 parts per million. That room is actually located in the high school. And what we did is kind of prioritize anything over 1,000. When you get to that point, the effects of CO2 can make you drowsy, can cause somebody to lose concentration, can allow the room to feel somewhat stuffy, could give you a headache. It's just not a great learning or working environment if you were in an office environment. These CO2 samples were taken. I have a list of the rooms. They were taken when there were people in the rooms. People in a room without makeup air cause CO2 because they breathe. In nature, CO2 occurs naturally. When these samples were taken, the outside CO2 was in the low 400s, and I have a high of 2708. And then I go down to a little bit over 1,000. We do have other areas in the district that do not have unit ventilators in their rooms, but their CO2 levels are lower than 1,000, probably due to leaky windows or whatever it is, but there is some outside air getting in there. So this is something we had done years ago at the upper elementary school, and we're looking to kind of continue the process with this warrant article. Everybody's talking about, you know, in light of COVID, but this isn't a COVID thing only. This is more of a making our learning environment much better, to allow kids to concentrate, to allow the teachers to, you know, not get headaches as easily or whatever. But, you know, air exchange in an environment, whether it's an office or a classroom or anything like that, is very, very, very important. It's kind of like if you build a house and you build it too tight, you know, your CO2 levels are going to rise, and it becomes what some people would call kind of an unhealthy environment to be living in. That's why a lot of times with these, you know, insulated homes that are, you know, have these triple pane windows that they often bring in fact, I think it's code that you bring in, you know, outside air, makeup air. There is no code as far as CO2 goes, but there is something called an ASHRAE standard. It's the American Association for Heating and Ventilation people. And, you know, anything over 1,000, anything touching 800, they don't really recommend. as a healthy environment. So it's been placed on the capital improvement plan, and we're looking to do a lease purchase to get, it could be, this has to be all designed and everything like that. You just can't, get a per unit price for each unit ventilator and poke a hole in the wall and come up with the amount you're going to do. There has to be other things taken into consideration. So if this proves to go forward, there'll probably be a 3-month design period going into, what has to be done to accommodate these systems outside of just the installation and locations. So it'll take some time. It may be done over the summer and then into the fall during vacation periods. I think it's going to probably take a year long to complete, much in the same way the upper elementary school took a year long to complete. So that's basically the overview of the unit ventilator warrant articles for your consideration. And if Andy wants to add anything, I will certainly, bow to him, but that's pretty much what I have to say about it. And it's a majority vote only.
So Chuck, if you're okay, if I can provide the school board perspective on this one, if that works.
Works for me.
Okay. So as Matt mentioned, we had a study by Honeywell done 2 to 3 years ago about the carbon dioxide level within the classrooms and the impact it was could have on learning. It's been one of those things that we wanted to address, but with the advent of COVID, while it's not directly COVID related, a lot of the CDC reports talk about the inclusion of fresh air into rooms to improve the quality of air just in general, for COVID as well as other things. So what occurred first is administration, when they built the capital improvement plan that they presented to all of us earlier this year or in the fall, they included 10 years worth of approximately 400,000. Then it went up from there to address 1/10 of it. So if you look at what Matt talked about, it's a bucket of rooms. What do you say, 50 or 60 some odd rooms across the district?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. What the original proposal is to do 1/10 of those per year over a 10-year period. And then if you put inflation in, obviously today's dollars by the time you hit year 9 would be significantly more. And the biggest issue is it would take 10 years to address all the areas that we needed to address. So the school board, when we heard this, we had a follow-up presentation by Honeywell on the current state and how they would approach it. And we looked at them to say what options exist if we wanted to address all of those 50 to 60 rooms up front, and determine if there was a way that we could pay for that over a period of time. Because we were worried more about health, because in the middle of COVID and everything else, we were worried about the health of the classrooms, especially the ones with higher CO2. So Honeywell came back and said that over a year to a year and a half period, they could do all these areas. We looked at 3 different options. One, the way the CIP was, where we did 1/10 for 10 years, which would drag out the implementation. We then looked at what it would be to do a bond, what the cost would be, where we would do a bond for the full amount up front, and then be able to do all the work up front, but then pay for it over a 10-year period. And then, if you remember back in 2014, we did a lease purchase to have the gas lines installed to the high school as well as the upper elementary, the Mascola complex. And we did a lease purchase of that at the same time. And the advantage is a lease purchase many times has more favorable rates than bonding, but also does not require the supermajority. It doesn't require the 3/5. It can be a simple majority that passes. When Matt did an analysis of the numbers for the school board, we found that the cheapest way to get it done was not with a bond, and even not paying it a little bit over 10 years, but rather the lease purchase. So the $4 million over a 10-year period was the cheapest of the 3 alternatives in order to address all the rooms where we had these issues, be able to get it all done in the first year to year and a half, and then but be able to pay for it in the most cost-effective way over a 10-year period. So the school board believed that this was a high priority to address, and therefore has been working with the administration to come up with this proposal and this concept, and that's what's in front of you today. So
Yeah.
thanks.
If I could add one more thing, do you mind, Mr. Mower?
Oh, not at all.
Okay. I just want to kind of give everybody perspective if they're thinking, well, why didn't they do this when the district was being constructed? You know, when we first had Master Cola up our elementary school, which I believe used to be the high school back in the day. You know, we have 663,000 square feet of buildings in the school district. You look at Master Cola Elementary School, I have it down here as built in 1961. There's 20,000 square feet, an addition in 63, an addition in 87, an addition in 91, an addition in 97. And then we had a little bit of a kindergarten addition going on. They were in 2003. Anything 97 above has unit ventilators or makeup air return in the classrooms. But those 61, 63, 87, 91 pieces don't. You go to the upper elementary school, I have, you know, it started out as 11,000 square feet back in 1949. You know, then you have an addition in 53, 56, 58, 72, and then the 97 additions. So we're a district of additions that doesn't really lend itself nicely to going back in time and doing retrofit. And, you know, that's why you have to do it through these unit ventilators, because you can't have one big system that carries the entire load of a school, because there's not enough room in the ceiling for the ductwork, because they weren't designed that way. You know, Merrimack High School in 1965 started out at 30,000 square feet, then an addition in 1970, then a big addition, 100,000 square feet in 77, and then 97 is 1,800 square feet, and then we did the three-story addition in 2001. The only building that's really has the proper amount of ventilation and makeup air in it is the middle school that was built in 2001. So, you know, then you have Reeds and Thornton's 1968, then an addition in 70, then in 97, then in 2005 a little bit. So, you know, we have 663,000 square feet of building, most of which was built back in the day where this wasn't even thought of or wasn't even a requirement. And so now we're looking at kind of doing a retrofit, kind of like, you know, the asbestos that was there forever when these buildings were built. It was okay to put asbestos floor tile in. It was great stuff, lasted forever. It couldn't get rid of it. Well, we had to pay to get rid of it. And now it's time to look at these buildings, look at our facilities, see if they're actually the way they should be as far as climatization goes for an optimal kind of learning environment, and to try and correct, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe 60% of what we have out there. So this is what this warrant article tries to do by lessening the CO2 and making the air much nicer for everyone in the building. It's not a lavish kind of endeavor. It's something that really is kind of necessary and needs to get done sooner than later. And we thought, well, why don't we try now? So this is why it's coming up at this point in time. That's all, Mr. Mower.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Your institutional history in the district is exceptional.
Yeah, it's called a little piece of paper that Jim O'Neill gave me that I put in a spreadsheet.
Nevertheless, you are a valuable contribution to this district.
Thank you, sir.
And Andy, I want to thank you for the school board perspective on this. You know, as usual, you covered the bases on it pretty well. So the committee is now open for questions on this particular article. if in fact you have any after that thorough presentation.
I do, Chuck.
Oh, Brian raised his hand first.
Okay, go ahead.
So I've got two on the lease terms. One, you mentioned the first thing, if the article passes, is going to be a design phase or engineering phase.
Oh, yeah.
Is Honeywell capping the price if the lease is agreed to coming out of that engineering phase, or is the price subject to change once they complete the engineering?
Well, excuse me, I have my little friend coming to visit me. Go ahead, go play. No, the price will be capped. We're not going to be spending more than the lease allows us. So
Okay.
that's
So
gonna
the
be known.
lease amount is fixed. It's not subject to change coming out of
That-
the engineering phase.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And then you said there's an escape clause. Can you put
Yep.
a little bit more color around that escape clause and what exactly it covers?
It's actually called a non-appropriation clause. It'll be in the lease documents that basically says that at any given point, if the school board fails to fund the lease payment, that the lease can be broken. But then what happens is that, the leasing agency will more than likely put a black mark on your credit, so it'll hard to get financing for anything else. And then they basically, own the equipment until the lease is done. So it's kind of like leasing a vehicle. If you miss too many leasing payments, well, then where's the vehicle going back to? It's going to the dealer. So that's what the non-appropriation clause is. So if you fail to fund the leasing payment in any budget year, you can get out of it, but the equipment goes back to the owner, essentially.
So,
At this point, the owner would be the leasing company.
so Matt, can I give a perspective?
Sure.
Really? So essentially, when you do a bond or a lease, if you default on either one, you've got a price to pay. In the case of a bond, they can come after for the remaining amount through financial ones. In a lease, it's the equipment base. In either case, it's the responsibility of the school board to make sure that those payments are covered, whether they're bond or a lease, in operating budgets moving forward. So this is sort of a ongoing cost that the school board, on behalf of the voters, because they approve it, would ensure that it was paid. But the ramifications are like a bond. If you don't pay it, there's ramifications. In the case of a lease, there's ramifications. So it's called an escape clause, but you really have to treat it just like you would a bond. At least that's the sort of the layman's way that I look at it anyhow.
Yeah, true statement. Because, the amounts that I've quoted you, the $471,000, that's based upon a lease rate of 1.7%. And we just turned over 3 years of financials to Honeywell's going to be our GC general contractor on this. And so when the time comes, they can shop it, we can shop it, go on the open market and see what we can get, but we expect the rate to be less than the 1.7. So the payments that I'm quoting you right now into the future are more, unless something really astronomical happens to the economy. Kind of like COVID, I guess. No, not really. That would be kind of a ceiling kind of price, worst case scenario.
Very well. Comments, questions from the committee?
Bill, Chuck?
Carol?
Yeah, I have several. The first is the talk from the federal government is that the next version of COVID relief coming from the feds is supposed to presumably include some money for schools for ventilation. Assuming that actually happens, can we apply that money to paying for this lease, or is there some accounting minutia that says this doesn't count towards using that aid that we might get from the feds?
There's nothing that I have seen that says we can't do that.
Okay, so
And we're still curious as to how much money we're actually going to get, when the money is going to come, and when is the time frame that we have to spend it in. I don't know. I'm not sure if we talked about it at this committee or at the board level, but we did get some money from the federal government recently that we spent on personal protective equipment and computers in addition. And, we knew about it on like Thursday, and they gave us, 4 to 6 weeks to spend the money. And then by the end of December, what we hadn't already spent, received, and put in place and made operational had to be returned to the state. So we had like a 5 to 6 week window, especially when you're ordering computers, when everybody else in the world is ordering computers, there's a lead time there, but it just wasn't enough to get them in-house. You had to get them up, operational, and in the hands of students during that period. So that was one caveat with the last little round of funding we got from the feds. So, I can't say how much we're gonna get, and I can't say, supposedly I heard the state already has the money, but they haven't told us yet. And, we'll see. So I can't guarantee anything, but I haven't heard we can't apply the ventilation payments of this lease towards using that money, but it'll have to be done in, I'm sure, a short time frame. So you couldn't do it for 10 years because they're not going to let you hold on to the money for 10 years and spend it in that fashion. So it may cover a lease payment or two, maybe.
Well,
But-
what I'm kind of thinking, and I'm just gonna pull numbers out of thin air here. Let's say they gave us 500,000 for ventilation. And our payment is 471, but the first year it's much lower than that.
Mhm.
We could probably prepay the lease in order to use our whole 500,000 allotment rather than lose it.
If the lease terms allow.
Yeah, the lease terms, you can do,
Right.
when you're building a lease, you can do a lot of flexible things with it. And if the lease terms allow, and the ones that we have done in the past, they allow, a prepayment like that, early payments. So,
But
yeah.
knowing this scenario might come down the pike, I would especially ask you to look to make sure we have that in there.
Oh, yeah.
And then my other questions are, does this lease include them maintaining the system? And at the end of the 10 years, do we own the system?
Well, yeah. The lease payment doesn't include the cost to maintain the system. That will be in kind of a following budget. For year one, there's going to be a maintenance contract that we have for this equipment. And so year one, when it's all installed, there'll be no cost, which is the 21-22 budget, which we're talking about. But year two, there'd probably be perhaps a $26,000 increase in the amount we pay Honeywell for a maintenance agreement for this equipment. So that's an added future cost for 22-23.
Okay, and then at the end of the 10 years, do we own this whole thing outright?
Oh, well, we own it outright. Yes, correct. Yeah. Just like we did the gas lines and everything like that. Mhm.
Okay, I think I'm set.
Yep.
All right, I would like to caution the members of the committee relative to unanticipated funds. If it's federal money and there's no guarantee that we're going to get it, it is unanticipated. Conversely, if we were to anticipate those funds, then they would have to be recorded in the budget. So federal money is unanticipated, and we cannot make decisions based on whether we will think we might get it or not.
That's a true statement. Yeah.
Any other comments? What is the pleasure of the committee relative to this article?
Chuck, I had a question.
Yes, Lee.
As taxpayers tend to look at the bottom dollar annually, I'm curious, Matt, what that would cost in our tax an annual tax increase per household?
It would be less than 15 cents a thousand for a $471,000 payment. But then you go to 23-24 and you go to the year 24-25, then we lose the middle school, the middle school debt. So that's a decrease of almost $800,000. So, but the 471,000 probably has a tax impact of around 15 cents a thousand or a little bit less.
I think Gillian had a question before.
Gillian,
Hi. Well, Carol actually asked the main one I had about annual maintenance costs. But what's the estimated lifespan of these ventilators before they'd have to be replaced?
We have some that are under, maintenance agreements. They come in, they get checked over, the moving parts get maintained and lubricated, filters get changed, everything like that. We have some that are 40 some odd years old. So it's quite, they don't have a tendency to be something that's a high maintenance item. And the lifespan of them, it's not like it's technology that's going to evolve rapidly over the years. You're just bringing in, air from the outside, tempering it a bit and pushing it in. So lifespan is fairly long.
In the interest of being as transparent as possible with voters, would RSA allow including the estimated maintenance cost as part of the warrant article? Obviously, it isn't in the year one cost, but including a note as part of the warrant article that anticipated annual maintenance cost is approximately $23,000 after year one, even though it's not money to be raised as part of the warrant.
Well, we're talking year one cost only in the warrant article.
Understood. I'm saying in terms of ensuring that voters have as complete of information as possible to include the information that if they approve this, year one cost is 90 something, but in year two and forward, we will also incur an additional maintenance cost of approximately 23,000. Is that permissible, or would RSA block that? Would DRA frown upon it?
Matt, can I answer that? I would put that in the voter's guide, to be honest with you. There's a lot of the details in the voter's guide. I think that would be a good place for it.
That was the same thought I was having, was it couldn't be part of the actual article, but I don't see any reason why that explanation couldn't be in the voter's guide.
I think it would be inappropriate for us not to make sure that that is being published to the voters. As long as they have all of the information, I think it would give a very bad impression if we put forward an article and it incurs costs in year 2 through 40 that people didn't realize were part of the article, and it makes it look like we're acting in bad faith.
I think the school board's view on this is that we've got to do a fairly transparent marketing program as to what this is going to accomplish and what the costs are. So we certainly, I think that's a great idea to include that in there. It's not significant, but it is certainly an important aspect. So the school board will work with Matt and others when we do the voter's guide. Should this, because on the warrant, we will certainly put what we can in there to make it seem as important and needed as possible with the full information. So.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was going through past history of not just what we've done, but what towns have done when they purchase like a high dollar item like a fire truck or a communications console or something like that. And I haven't seen that. We're going to pay $1 million for this fire truck, but note the ongoing maintenance cost of this may be blank. So I can't really draw any kind of parallel to putting such a note. And I'm glad, because the next thing that's going to come out of my mouth was what Andy said was the appropriate place is really the voter's guide, where we try and kind of lay all that stuff out there to give the voters a complete picture of what the total cost of ownership would be. And we also, at that point in time, give them the information, what the benefit of this would be too. So it would be, transparent and trying to encompass everything we know about the project.
I would also add with what Andy was saying, adding to that voter guide, what you mean by escape clause, because the way it's written in the warrant article looks like it's to our benefit, but the way you described it is not to our benefit.
Well, it's in the RSAs that you can have a lease purchase with a non-appropriation clause, and it can get just a simple majority. But I would definitely do that. I agree with you.
Move that we recommend the article.
Hang on a second. And also in that voter's guide, include that you already have units that are 40 years old, so they understand it's not something that has to be replaced every 10 years or 15 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if we already have some units installed in there for many years, I think that would help disperse some of the confusion that could happen.
Yeah, no, that sounds valid. Yes, thank you.
All right, we have,
Second the motion.
we have a second for the motion.
Who
it-
seconded?
Lee French.
Thank you.
Do we have any further deliberation? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. Pat?
Okay, hold on. I have to switch screens. Hold on, please.
That's all right. I'll take the time to compliment the school board on addressing something on the capital improvement program. I know it's difficult to reach into that program and make things happen for the future, but it exists for a reason, and I think you've done a good job on this.
Andy,
Recommend.
Brian,
Recommend.
Gillian,
Recommend.
Dan,
Recommend.
Jordan,
Recommend.
Carol,
Recommend.
Mackenzie,
Recommend.
Lee,
Recommend.
Ellen,
Recommend.
Chuck,
Recommend.
Naomi,
Recommend.
and Lori.
Recommend.
That's 12-0-0.
Okay, well, that takes care of our warrant articles for this evening. So we are back to our budget deliberations. And I guess this is the time to ask if there are any adjustments to be made. Seeing none from the committee members, I will offer one myself. I move that we reduce the maintenance lines for the red building by $5,000. Do I have a second?
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion.
Thank you, Carol. I have gone over the reductions that the school district made. And I think that there are further reductions that can be made without affecting the disposition of the building. I know we are all very emotional about the red building. And we hope that in some time in the near future, its purpose will be adjudicated properly. In the meantime, it would actually cost us more to try and deal with shutting it down completely than to simply keep it going at a deadline pace, so to speak. And so that's what this motion provides, is an opportunity to further cut the electricity and so forth that is not necessary to be spent, and by $5,000.
Chuck, can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
You had alluded at the end of the last meeting to the idea of boarding it up and locking it up and turning everything off. What you're proposing now is something different than that?
That's correct. I came to realize after a discussion with the department head and the superintendent that it would be a good deal more costly in terms of actually wasting money, because we would then have to spend it to pull out the propane tank and to do all of these things and so forth. And that maybe the best course of action were to simply give it its status quo existence until something that can be done. But I felt very, very deeply that while $5,000 doesn't sound a lot in an $81 million budget, we are nevertheless the budget committee, and we are looking for things that can reduce the budget without impairing the function of the district. And I know that when people at home at their kitchen table say, oh, what do you mean we have $5,000 to throw on that thing that we don't really need to throw on it? And so what my proposal provides is to eliminate all of the unnecessary spending that is wasteful in maintaining the status quo of that building until such time as the school district finds some solution to its disposition.
I guess my question is, I was under the impression that was what we were already doing. I think I had asked the question last year, and I was told that because the building was still technically available, that we had to keep the sprinklers running, which meant we had to keep the water running, which then meant we needed to keep some heat on to keep the pipes from freezing. So it was kind of a snowball effect. So what are we cutting that doesn't impact all of that?
Well, you know, the whole story of this building has grown like topsy. And as the chairman of this committee and feeling very deeply about it and how it looks to people at home, I felt that we could shave another $5,000 off of the maintenance for that facility and still keep its status quo intact so as to not cause a larger catastrophe to kick in until such time as there is a design plan for it. If the budget committee wants to throw away another $5,000, then you're more than happy to do that. But I, in good conscience, can't do that. And that's why I'm proposing another $5,000 cut.
I guess I'm looking for input, possibly from Matt. If Matt's not capable of doing it tonight, maybe we need to consult with Tom Tuso. But can we do this and not have pipes freezing and other things that would cause us more damage than what we save? I'm all for saving money, but not if it's going to cost us money because of damage.
If I could say something, do you want me to talk to that?
Oh, certainly.
Okay. You know, when I look at the totality of our utility lines for the entire district, it's over $1 million, a little bit over $1 million. And, you know, we're going to spend what we need to spend to keep this building from, you know, having its pipes burst and whatever. And perhaps we could look at some scenarios like removing every other light as far as fixtures go, delamping the building, so to speak. It's basically only used during the daytime anyway. We could look at putting the heat down even further than it is and not risk it. So there's a potential to save money there. But, if we had like an exceedingly cold winter like we've had, as of late, as opposed to a milder winter, which was really kind of nice, a lot of that is dependent upon it. So, we could absorb this cut in the operating budget if we needed to. And, it's something, if it's the pleasure of the budget committee to do so for consideration, that it's something that we could work with.
All right, given that assurance from Matt, then I guess I can get behind supporting this.
Andy had his hand up too, Chuck.
Andy,
Just really quick. So when we looked at this, and actually this was largely me, I'm the one that drove this in the school board side. We knew that what we spent in actual utility costs was significantly less than what was budgeted. I mean, it was like 23,000, nearly 24,000 that was budgeted. We spent $7,800 based on that 1 year. So we knew we wanted to cut, but at least my proposal that the school board sort of got behind was we wanted to not cut it right down to the exact amount, but rather cut it, but leave a little buffer in there so we had enough budgeted should the utility costs go up for some unforeseen reason. So we believe that the actual cost, if everything remains the same, will be within the range of what your cut would do. But we as a board just felt that we wanted to make sure there was enough in there to cover any unforeseen increase in costs. Because remember, every other utility item is based on a 3-year rolling average for for all the other buildings and things like that. And we don't have a 3-year rolling average for this building. So we tried to err a little bit on the conservative side, did not really cut it to the bare bones and leave a little bit. So that's just the history of how we achieved the number that we did.
So is it safe to assume that I don't have the number in front of me. It's already been cut from the previous year in this budget from 23,000 to
12,000.
To around 12,000. We had kept in there the number that we received from the previous owner to occupy that building in some sort of, day-to-day fashion. And we carried that over. So, not knowing what the future holds, but as we go further and further along, we realize that we're not really going to be utilizing that building for any kind of occupancy, any kind of planned occupancy. The only time it's really been utilized right now is by the Merrimack Police Department, who does training in that building. We've been told by the Assistant Fire Chief, John Manueli, the Fire Marshal, that we have to do a few things to that building to even get an occupancy permit to have people in there. And that would be updating fire panels, everything like that. It's just not worth it at this point in time. So we were holding that number in there, but the cut that was made at the board level was definitely, something that, we'd agreed to keep it alive for another year. And then so the police department could use it for training purposes.
No, nothing in this proposed cut that Chuck's making would preclude the police from
Does the
still.
police department pay anything when they use it?
No, we don't charge them for that. It's kind of a community service. We're not using the building for anything right now. So we haven't been charging them at all for that.
So if half the lights are taken out, the temperature's turned down as low as is safe without the pipes bursting, would the police still be able to use it as a training
Do
facility?
we use the police for any services in the school that they charge us for?
Yes, we do. We have special police details for, a lot of things. So yeah, we pay them and they do charge us. But that's a whole nother discussion as far as philosophical thoughts,
All right.
Did Brian get his question answered?
I was asking if we put it down to the absolute lowest temperature, take half the lights out, all of the things that can be done to get to the absolute minimum utility spending, can the police still train in there? Or would that take it to a point where they couldn't use it for anything?
Oh, I think they can still train in there. I think that they can train in there. Yes.
Okay.
Like I said, the first cut was something that gave us a comfort factor. This is something we still think we can perhaps do, but if we have to do something and we can't hit the number, we do have other avenues that we could look towards in the budget as far as other utility lines within the operating budget. And still, this is dependent upon the weather. It's not like if it's a hot summer, we're not running the air conditioning in that building. The police want to use it. Well, they're gonna be involved in real life situations with no AC. So that's the way it goes. So yeah, but they could still use it.
Any other questions?
I have a comment. Well, I'm very glad that the actual operating costs of maintaining it were significantly lower than originally budgeted for last year. I'm sort of on team should have torn it down right after we bought it. So we wouldn't keep having these discussions year after year about how to maintain this building. With that said, I think given the idea of taking out every other light, turning the temperature down to the rock bottom minimum, and basically making it as uncomfortable as possible while still keeping it safe, I think that's definitely something I could get behind.
Any other comments?
For a sec, if
Andy, a question.
Is that, huh?
I think it was Jordan and I and Carol each raised a hand. Does that sound right?
All right, I'll go. I guess my feeling is if the school board already cut out, $10,000? I guess my question for Chuck is that not enough to show that we're properly budgeting for what this building requires? Or is it just the simple thing that you'd love for that number to be zero if possible? And I guess I'm just trying to figure out if they hadn't already brought it down in the budget to be more in line with what we actually spent, then I'd agree. But I guess I'm feeling like if we've already more appropriately budgeted for what the real cost is, now I just feel like we're kind of nickeling and diming if we've already dropped it by 10 grand.
Well, nickeling and diming is exactly what people don't want to hear at their kitchen table. Because $5,000 is a lot of money to somebody sitting at their kitchen table.
But Chuck, I guess my point is this isn't like books that we're going to go out there. From what I heard right now, we're already doing what we can to try to minimize the expense of keeping this thing going. And I guess what I'm asking is from a pragmatic perspective, are we actually going to save more money by budgeting less, or are we already going to do those things that were mentioned? Do you know what I mean? But it's not like it's a product we're buying or not buying. Aren't we already doing what we can to minimize the cost on this? I don't know. I mean, I'm just for discussion purposes, I'm just suggesting that I don't know if changing that number actually changes the expense.
Well, let me try to explain it this way. The school board just handed us an $81 million budget. And the budget committee, who is actually responsible for the budget, has thus far not shown any interest whatsoever in removing anything from that $81 million budget. Now, I realize that 97% of the budget is contractual, and there's not much we can do about that. So the discretionary spending lies in some supplies, some maintenance, and those kinds of things. Now, I will tell you from my perspective that the budget that we are about to pass is a good, healthy budget for the school district. And it doesn't take anything away from them. Another $5,000 cut still wouldn't take anything away from them. There's the $100,000 contingency in the budget, for that matter. And yeah, so, you know, I'm very sensitive to the people that are sitting at home going, what are you talking about? Give us a break. You can't cut anything out of the budget. And here we have an opportunity to cut what we apparently think is a small figure from the budget, quote unquote, nickeling and diming. Well, that's not how the citizens and the taxpayers see it. And I would highly recommend that the Budget Committee seriously contemplate my motion to take $5,000 from the budget, or we truly will be seen as only a rubber stamp for the school board. When it is not their budget, it is our budget. It is statutorily our responsibility. If you feel that we should add more to the budget, well, somebody can make that adjustment if they like. I was interested in cutting the budget by $5,000 without harming in any way, shape, or form the operation of that particular red building. There is no crisis line. We could probably take $20,000 out of the budget, and they would still have sufficient funds to do whatever they want to do with that building, which is their purview. They can transfer money in the budget from one area to another and do whatever it is they want.
So, I mean, I guess listen, I don't want to drag this out over this one point, and I don't disagree with you that we don't want to be a rubber stamp, but I guess what I'm saying is this isn't a consumable, this isn't books or pencils. And I guess what I'm wondering is if we want to do this to this line, we could probably find a lot of lines in the budget where we budget, like Matt said, a 3-year average. And I guess what I'm wondering is at what point do we then go line by line and trim
Well,
50, wait a minute.
If the Budget Committee wants to do that, they have the ability to do that. There are 12 people on the committee. All of them are free to make any adjustments to the budget that they want. This was an adjustment I wanted to make and felt was in the interest of the taxpayers.
So could I say something that partly might address Jordan's concern, and then I also have a question afterwards?
Sure.
Okay. My thought, why I think I am in support of this, is until Chuck brought up this proposed reduction, I had not heard anything from the school department coming up with innovative ideas like reducing the amount of lights and reducing the temperature further. So I think that reducing this line item in the budget, aside from the small savings to the taxpayers, it also sends a message to the school district of we want this utilities for a building we're not getting any utility from to be as minimal as it is possible to have it be. So I think that while it does save a little bit of money, it is also symbolic in sending that clear message to the school district. And then my question, I think, is to Andy, and that is, do you have a good idea when we can expect to see a warrant article to tear this building down once and for all so we can be done with this problem?
So this ties back to something, I don't know, Matt, you didn't remember at the last budget committee meeting, you talked about the status of the planning, right? The site plan, because the school board's position is that we are fully in support of tearing the building down, but believe we need to do it in alignment with the work on the site plan for the high school complex that the funding was provided in the last election. Because as we heard, there's unintended costs when you shut the building down. You got to take out oil tanks and propane tanks and other costs, and that's where we wanted to tie the tear down of the building with any other major efforts we're going to do to take structures down as part of that plan so we could get an economy of scale out of it. I can't speak to whether that will be in next year's budget or not, because I'm not sure of the status of where we are with that, the overarching plan. So I can hand it off to Matt and let him give you some perspective, but that's the school board position on this.
Well, I'm interested to hear from Matt, but let me also respond, because our conversation at the last meeting has literally been waking me up in the middle of the night. Because the more I thought about it, I said, wait a minute, we're spending money for utilities to maintain this building because we might save some money from economies of scale when we go to tear it down. And I don't see any way in the world anybody can make the case that we will save more from an economy of scale when we tear this down than what it has cost us in utilities for 2.5, and now with another year, 3.5 years, and possibly even more. So I think we're spending money to save some smaller amount of money. So budgetarily, it doesn't add up to me.
If the building were sitting completely unused, I could not disagree with you. But because it is being used on a monthly basis by an entity of the town, that is the reason that the school board has chosen to go down this route to spend $7,800 a year to keep it alive so that the police department and other agencies can use the building while we determine what the right course for the whole complex is. That's the logic. You can agree to disagree, but that's the logic the school board has.
I have to assume that before we bought this building, they found other places to train, and when this building is gone, they will find other places to train. So I just see this as we're throwing money away. Unfortunately, this year I can't do anything about it because I know there's no way in the world a warrant article to tear the building down this year would not pass, so I'm not even trying to go that route. But I feel like this has been a huge waste of money, and I feel very bad for the taxpayers because of that.
Any other comments?
So I would say, and I know Gillian had her hand up as well, but I would say that the amount of money is relatively small in the scale of the budget, but I do think that the motion has some merit in terms of increasing some small amount of pressure and momentum towards finally addressing the ultimate disposition of this building versus letting it just continue to be a status quo that we grow comfortable with. So continuing to squeeze it as much as we can until the thing goes away. I think this kind of puts us a little bit in that direction, even though the dollar amount within the overall budget is pretty trivial. It does give us some inertia towards getting rid of the building eventually.
Any other comments?
Gillian had something.
Gillian?
I know that you said up until this point, Matt, we haven't charged the police department. Is it possible to ask for reimbursement or something equal to the cost? Not necessarily trying to make money off of them, but equal to the cost of these utilities.
We could always ask for a donation or a fee, seeing that they charge us for special police details if we have, you know, an event going on at one of the schools or something like that, and you know, we allow them to utilize that building, and they bring in other agencies also. So we could always ask, yes. It just depends.
That's what I was going for. Yeah. I know it's hard and I know it's a philosophical thing, but they also have a budget for training, right? And I know that, you know, it's hard and it's a catch-22, but you also have to pay for the maintenance of that. So a nominal fee would not be out of the question.
Mm-hmm. That's something we could entertain. You know, we try. The police department in Merrimack is wonderful. They're a great partner of ours. Is same with the fire department. So we all try and work together. So this would be something that we could have a chat with them about.
Are there any other comments?
I'd like to just make sure I understand it completely. Correct me, Matt, or anybody else if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is that we have already cut it down from what it was to a more realistic figure plus a buffer. And that this is a recommendation to remove the buffer, with Matt having said that if we use what would have been the buffer, there are places that could come from. And so it's essentially a question of whether we ask for the money now and then return it to the taxpayer if it's not used, or if we simply say we think we'll stay within the amount. Does that sound accurate?
As far as I'm concerned, what I'm saying, yes. And plus what you're doing is, it's a cut, but it's a targeted cut, and it's making a statement, essentially, about the final disposition of the Brentwood building. We're going to be having the master plan study. Hopefully we'll have that done by, the early fall. So anything we wanted to incorporate into the operating budget would be able to be incorporated into the operating budget at that point in time. And I am sure that the removal of this facility will be something that will be number one in order to allow us to redo parking, redo traffic patterns. Right now, it's just in the way. So that will be a recommendation. I've already discussed that with the engineer that we have looking at this right now.
So as far as for what it's worth, I'm in favor of this. I think it is a statement that respects work that many people on this body across the years have both put in and had a position on in relation to that building without doing harm to anyone and just making the point. And so there really is no reason not to do it.
I agree. Let's vote. Motion to vote.
All right. Pat?
Chuck,
Yes.
Gillian,
Oh, golly, what do I say? Yes.
Ellen,
Ellen, you were muted.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Lee,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Andy.
No.
Dan,
With the hope of never hearing about this again, yes.
Jordan,
In favor, yes.
Mackenzie, is she on the other call?
I think she may
Mackenzie's
be.
muted. There you go. Mackenzie,
Yes.
thank you. That's 11-1-0. It leaves you with a budget of $81,870,163.
Are there any other adjustments to the budget? Going once? Twice? I think that our business for this evening probably, Pat,
You need a motion to move an amount to the public hearing.
I move to bring that amount that you stated to a public hearing. On the
Second.
9th of February.
And who is the second, please?
Me, Lori.
Thank you, Lori.
And now we need a vote on the motion.
Naomi,
In favor?
Mackenzie,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Andy,
Andy, you're muted.
Thought I was on. Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Lee,
In favor.
Carol,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Gillian,
Yes.
Chuck.
Yes,
That's unanimous. 12,
that concludes our business for the 2nd of February, and we will reconvene on the 9th for further deliberation of the operating article and other articles that may come in, etc.
before you do that, Chuck, please, if I may.
Yes,
The public hearing is an in-person hearing. It will take place at the high school cafeteria. Masks and social distancings will be required. Members of the public who do not wish to wear a mask are encouraged to send written comments to the committee at msdbudgetcom@sau26.org. The Budget Committee meeting starts at 7 p.m. The public hearing starts at 7:30, and then after the public hearing, the Budget Committee resumes for any final actions on the budget and any warrant article recommendations they may wish to change. Thank you.
and thanks everybody for coming.
Are you declaring the meeting adjourned, Chuck?
I won't make such a declaration. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Seconded.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you.